What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today we've got another live fantasy football mock draft for you back on Fantasy Pros with a 12-team full PPR mock where we'll be selecting 8th overall. Should be pretty interesting. Our roster, 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, a flex, and then 5 bench spots. But that's pretty much it. So let's get into it. And while we wait for it to load, a quick reminder, if you enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us there. Let us hear in the comment section, agree, disagree, along with any other questions you guys might have. We'll do our best to answer them all. But with that being said, let's get right into it. We will take a quick look at the draft board. The first 7 picks are in. They are Christian McCaffrey, CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. No real shock there. You know, as of late, we've been doing a lot of mocks on like ESPN, on Yahoo, and yeah, these wide receivers still are kind of bunched up together. Then Bijan, then Amon-Ra St. Brown. So now we are in a spot where, you know, if we go next best available wide receiver, to me, that's Garrett Wilson. If we go next best available running back, that is Breece Hall. And, you know, we can kind of go from there. I think that, you know, a lot of times the way I would normally be doing this is take Breece Hall here. Don't even think twice about it. But let's switch it up a little bit. Let's go with a receiver. My top 2 wide receivers in this instance would be Puka Nacua and Garrett Wilson. I personally have Garrett Wilson ranked a little bit higher. So let's go with that scenario here and then see if that pays off, see if any running backs that I really, really like drop to us in the next round. So yeah, immediately, like I expected, Breece Hall goes right afterwards. So no real shock there. Then A.J. Brown, then Saquon Barkley, Puka Nacua, Jahmyr Gibbs. Devontae Adams goes a lot higher than I would have expected. I've seen him, kind of drop in some mocks that I've done. Granted, 10-team leagues, but I've seen him like towards the end of the second round for what it's worth, and it makes sense why. Uncertainty at the quarterback situation, age, and just, last year you kind of look at the usage, you look at the number 1 wide receiver production, but afterwards Jonathan Taylor and then Marvin Harrison Jr. Way, way, way too early for Marvin Harrison Jr. in my opinion. So now here, if we go with another wide receiver, we're kind of looking at this group of Olave, Pittman, Ayuk, Drake London. I think we've gotten to the drop-off at the wide receiver position, so I'm going to go running back. And, a guy that I've kind of been getting a little bit higher on is Kyren Williams. I'm starting to kind of get back on the Kyren Williams bandwagon, that thinking there's a higher chance that he, comes closer to what we saw from last year than not, even with the addition of Blake Corum. So I'm going to go with Kyren Williams here, and we'll see what we have available to us in the next couple of rounds. I do think we had to go a running back there because looking at some of the other running backs, we knew that there would be a run on the position. Like Derrick Henry went, and then more so in the 3rd round, I guess, but still ETN, Rashad White, Pacheco, A-Chain. Here we had after our selection, that pretty much that exact group of wide receivers I mentioned: London, Olave, Ayuk, DJ Moore, Nico Collins, Michael Pittman. Good value at the start of the 3rd round. Josh Allen at the end of the 2nd round. I always say, don't be the first person to draft a quarterback. To me, that's just very bad value. Sam Laporta at the 302. Some of those running backs, we said ETN, Rashad White, A-Chain, then Jalen Waddle, and now Isaiah Pacheco. So basically, if we had waited for a running back, we'd be in a situation where our top running back would be either Josh Jacobs or Alvin Kamara, and then we'd have to make some magic happen in the following rounds. So we've got Kyren Williams as our 1. I'm going to add more running backs here because, you could definitely argue that the situation with the Rams, not as good as it was last year in terms of giving a huge upside ceiling to Kyren Williams. So let's add another running back. I'm probably going to add Alvin Kamara here. Speaking of fantasy points per game, for him, I think that last year, once he came back from the suspension, you know, we saw the upside. The upside is still there. The usage, we just need some more touchdowns, right? And full PPR, you still believe that he's going to get a lot of those dink and dump passes. I'll be honest with you, I'm between him and Josh Jacobs. I like both of them, but I'll give the slight edge to Alvin Kamara. And then let's see if we're lucky, maybe Josh Jacobs falls to us, but I can look at the draft board and see that that wasn't the case. We saw Deebo Samuel, Mike Evans, Stephon Diggs, Jalen Hurts, Travis Kelce with the first pick in the 4th round. So a couple things I want to mention. Hurts goes a full round after Josh Allen. I think that's much better value, especially with some of the downgrades Josh Allen has had offensively. Then Travis Kelce. So this is probably the latest I've seen Travis Kelce go, and it's also a 12-team league, followed by Josh Jacobs, Joe Mixon, James Cook. Now, we do have our wide receiver 1 in Garrett Wilson. Here I could potentially go with another running back, whether it's Kenneth Walker, whether it's Aaron Jones. Those are the guys that I would personally have ranked the highest. If we go with a wide receiver, I'm looking at Cooper Kupp. I'm looking at DK Metcalf, Amari Cooper. But, I'm kind of looking at it from the perspective of I already have Kyren Williams. I don't want to invest too much in these stacks of the same offense when it's not quarterback, running back, or quarterback wide receiver. You really, really put yourself in a position where if that offense has an off day, you're more than likely going to struggle because as opposed to the quarterback, running back, or quarterback wide receiver stack, the reason you do those is you pretty much guarantee yourself, hopefully, a doubling up on a touchdown. With the running back and wide receiver, you're kind of guaranteeing that, that's not going to be the case because, you can't have both of those guys score, so you're not really going to double up ever with a single touchdown score. So for that reason, I'm going to look elsewhere from Cooper Kupp. I think that looking at the draft board here, right now, the guy that I would have ranked the highest is George Pickens, potentially, but I want to wait. So what I'm probably going to do here is honestly, Patrick Mahomes is really tempting, and especially in a 12-team league in the 4th round, I think that's somewhere I could look. Trey McBride, does he get back to us? These are the questions you have to ask yourself when you're picking towards kind of the end of the draft at one of those extremes. And I do think picking 8th overall is, kind of close enough to that area. So let's see what happens. I'm kind of just curious. I'll take probably Patrick Mahomes here, looking at the draft board. So yeah, let's go with Patrick Mahomes. And then I personally think Patrick Mahomes with that revamped offense is going to be a problem. If I go quarterbacks, he's the highest ranked guy left on my board. So we go with Patrick Mahomes. I was definitely considering Trey McBride, and I was right. He does not make it back to us. So, more so we're kind of looking at the exercise of where do these guys get drafted after we pass on them. So Malik Neighbors also goes, he went immediately after our Patrick Mahomes selection. I wouldn't be selecting him ahead of some of these guys like Cooper Kupp, Terry McLaurin, you could argue DK Metcalf, Devonta Smith, Kenneth Walker, then Devonta Smith, Lamar, DK, Cooper Kupp, Amari Cooper, Aaron Jones, David Montgomery. I was hoping Aaron Jones would fall to us. That doesn't happen. Terry McLaurin, Keenan Allen, Trey McBride. Also would have loved Trey McBride falling to us, Ramondre Stevenson, and then Mark Andrews. So now we're back on the clock. And a guy that I really liked is still there. To me, that is George Pickens. So I'm not really going to hesitate. I'm going to select George Pickens. I think that he is prime for a breakout season, and I believe in it. I need a wide receiver too. So let's go George Pickens. And then if Zamir White is there, I'm going to be hard-pressed to not select him here. Tight end, at this point, we've gotten to the position where we've passed up on tight ends, and unless we're selecting Evan Ingram here, I think that we can wait maybe for a Kyle Pitts later on. So I'm looking for better value elsewhere. I think right now the highest upside as far as running backs are concerned is Zamir White. I want one more running back here. The way it's going to appear is he's going to be listed in my flex position, but I'm not necessarily going to start him that way. I can potentially hear one of these wide receivers that I draft, something like that, have one of them as my starters, and then Zamir White, somebody on my bench. And I think he's going to be better as the season progresses. So that's something I'm looking at there. Otherwise, we've seen a lot of quarterbacks here in this 6th round. We had C.J. Stroud in the 6th round. Kyler Murray was selected right after we made our Zamir White pick. Kyle Pitts was selected earlier than Evan Ingram. Interesting there. I probably would have selected Evan Ingram, but that means we can select him at the 708. We need a tight end. He's kind of the next highest upside guy remaining. Najee Harris, Spears, Dak Prescott, DeAndre Swift, Deontay Johnson, Jalen Warren, Joe Burrow, Javonte Williams, Rashee Rice, Jordan Love, Jaden Daniels. So Jaden Daniels getting selected earlier and earlier, again, because people fall in love with that rushing upside for the quarterback position. Jonathan Brooks, the top rookie running back. I still think that, I'm not as high on him as most. The reason being, I think that's just way too crowded of a backfield. Now, if some people are released, then that might open the conversation. And also, Brooks coming off an ACL serious injury, right? But here, I think the selection is very, very easy. We need a tight end. I think Evan Ingram, the best guy available. So, I like what we did there. I don't care if it's called a slight reach. I wanted to guarantee that we can get Evan Ingram. And that is exactly what we did, because there's 2 teams here that did not have a tight end. So I didn't want to risk it. And now we actually have our starting roster already complete. Mahomes, Kyren Williams, Alvin Kamara, Garrett Wilson, George Pickens, Evan Ingram, and Zamir White. Now we are in a perfect situation to just go best player available. And out of the guys that are still remaining, especially for wide receiver, I think Hollywood Brown would be where I go with this. Looking at these other wide receivers, Jackson Smith and Jigba, disappointing season last year. Cortland Sutton in Denver, do you believe in the quarterback situation there? Tyler Lockett, Christian Watson, Xavier Worthy, none of these guys really jump out at me. I think that Hollywood Brown is honestly the way I would go with it here, and potentially, getting a stack of Mahomes and him, a pretty cheap stack at that. Running back, I am looking at these names. Singletary, technically the starter for the New York Giants. Gus Edwards, technically the starter for the Chargers. Jerome Ford, I think, is somebody that we can look at in the next round, because I'm not really confident that Nick Chubb is going to come back early and, be available for the majority of the season. So I'm going to Hollywood Brown. We get that selection. Now let's see what happens with the next couple of picks. Ooh, we get sniped on Jerome Ford. So, what I will say here is I agree that Jerome Ford should be drafted ahead of Nick Chubb. I think Nick Chubb right now is way too big of a question mark, in the sense that, he could miss the majority of the season rehabbing from his knee injury. So nobody really knows what's going to happen there. And the reports haven't really been all that helpful or, all that optimistic. So what happened after Hollywood Brown? We saw Singletary, Jaden Reed, Chase Brown, Jackson Smith, Keon Coleman, Gus Edwards, Xavier Worthy, Kittle, Trey Benson, Jake Ferguson, David Njoku. So some of those tight ends going. Corum, Jerome Ford, Austin Eckler. Let's see if there's any, still running backs that are left that you can argue are must drafts at this point in time. But I would say no, not necessarily. Nick Chubb, I'm just avoiding him right now due to medicals. Ezekiel Elliott, potentially. He's probably the guy I would go with, but he's so old, and I just have so many question marks there. I wouldn't be shocked if, he starts out as the starter, but then kind of seeds away and it's a running back by committee approach. So I don't love that situation, but I do think he's the highest ranked kind of running back left, in my opinion. So let's go with that, I guess. Then we can add some more wide receivers. And there are still a couple names here that I'd be okay taking a chance on. Like, Jacoby Myers had a very, very good year last year. Somebody we could target. But let's go Ezekiel Elliott now. And we will think about what we're going to do at wide receiver shortly here. Because not a single wide receiver, I believe, was drafted. Oh, just Roman Dunze. Then Brock Bowers, TJ Hawkinson, Nick Chubb, Charbonnet, Khalil Herbert, Kendra Miller, Caleb Williams. So, yeah, I mean, as far as wide receivers, we pretty much have all those options still available to us. Curtis Samuel, somebody that I like. A lot of people are betting on Keon Coleman. I think Curtis Samuel is kind of that experienced guy out of the bunch that could sneakily be the best value, right? Other names here that I would point out, Josh Palmer, but it's still really, really early for Josh Palmer. So, we could go with a Jacoby Myers. We could go with, I'm going to go for the upside. I'm going to go with Curtis Samuel. I also think if you're looking upside, Brian Thomas might not be a bad pick. So let's go there. And I will say sometimes this can be the downfall of selecting quarterback early, right? I believe we selected Patrick Mahomes in the 4th round. So we could have had an extra flex play here, 4th round worthy that is pretty good, because let's see what we passed up here when we selected Patrick Mahomes. Yeah, we passed up on guys like Aaron Jones, Kenneth Walker, Cooper Kupp, Amari Cooper, Terry McLaurin, Trey McBride, and I would still be able to make the quarterback position work in the later rounds. So I always like to point that out, even though Patrick Mahomes, I do think, was a good value pick nonetheless. Here, I'm going to go with the upside. I'm going to go with Curtis Samuel at wide receiver. It's not going to like that pick, but, deal with it. I'm going with upside, and I think that's what you have to do at this point in time. Looking at some of these next selections, it is all running back pretty much. Looking at the draft board, right? I'll scroll down, all running back and a couple wide receivers. Yeah, it's backups. It's Ty Chandler, Chuba Hubbard, J.K. Dobbins, Antonio Gibson, Tyler Algier. A lot of backups, and then some high upside rookie wide receivers with Brian Thomas and Lan McConkey. So I'm fine with that. Let us go with. I think we can go with Jacoby Myers now as far as wide receivers are concerned. So I'm going to add him. Courtland Sutton is also tempting, kind of being the, pretty much the unquestioned number 1 in Denver now without Jerry Jeudy. So, I guess we could pivot there, but I'll go Jacoby Myers coming off a really good season and then make one last selection. We'll see who that will be here shortly. Probably going to just highlight another wide receiver that I like, Josh Palmer. I think that he can be the number 1 wide receiver in LA. So we scoop him up, and let's see the grade that we get. I don't know how high it'll be. It's a B grade, just kind of smack dab in the middle of it all. So just giving you guys my thoughts on it. I think if we had kind of approached this a little bit differently in terms of doing what we typically do, I would say, so selecting Breece Hall first, and then, maybe getting a wide receiver or doubling up with a second running back in the 2nd round. Obviously, this team could have looked a lot different, but I wanted to try out going wide receiver, then running back, some tandems that I typically don't make. But overall, it's all right. I will be honest with you, I don't love our bench. And I think that's probably a result of a couple things going quarterback early, and it kind of just had a cascading effect. But hey, let me know your thoughts. That's why we do these mock drafts after all. If you enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us there. Again, let us hear in the comment section any questions you guys might have. We'll do our best to answer them all. But in the meantime, we'll see you guys in future videos.